This video is sponsored by thingpenguin.com.
Mike, I'm recording. Is that all right with you?
Yep.
Dave Ridley here with Mike Lorrey. I'm Dave Ridley from ridleyreport.com, New Hampshire Free Stater, liberty activist. And Mike Lorrey, you are, I guess you could kind of qualify in the same sense. You're one of the few New Hampshire natives that actually can say that, correct?
Well, at when things got started with the Free State Project, basically Jason Sorens and I both had articles in the Libertarian Enterprise. His proposal for the Free State Project was either a month before or after my article on on the fatal flaws in the Constitution, and he got in touch with me and he asked me what I thought of his proposal, and we chatted a bit. And I actually, at the time, I'd mentioned that I had been preparing to move to Alaska because I had decided that the same thing, that libertarians as individuals were too diluted and really couldn't accomplish anything here in the lower 48, but there was a possibility of something in Alaska. And so he said, well, there's a bunch of people that have expressed positive interest in this, and you want to participate? And I'm like, sure, this is something that I think is great, and we should move forward on it. And so things started from there. And so I've kind of been with the Free State Project from the start. And I in basically I was involved on the Free State forums from the beginning, helping to recruit people, promoting New Hampshire. I became vice chair of the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire, and we put together an action team in the party to promote New Hampshire as the state for the Free State Project to move to. And so that's how we wound up winning that vote in 2003 by a rather large margin. And it's been in once we won that, then Jason and I were talking, and I'm like, what we should try to do is try to get a bunch of people to move earlier to try to accomplish some things to as a proof of concept, and that would, in my opinion, have motivated more people to sign up, because at that time we only had 5,000 signers, and we wanted to recruit another 15,000. And so we figured there would be a lot of fence sitters out there that would want to see some kind of prototype success before they would commit. And so that's, we started getting, I think we reached 2,500 to 3,000 early movers pretty quickly within a few years. And we started getting elected and started making legislative progress in 2000, after the Kelo decision in the New Newland versus Kelo Supreme Court case about eminent domain. I organized the party to propose eminent domaining the vacation estates of Supreme Court Justices Souter and Breyer. Here, they were both here in New Hampshire, and one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. We figured we could use that to motivate their cronies in the state, both state parties, to back our legislation that I authored to amend the state constitution here in New Hampshire to restrict eminent domain to only government owned and operated projects. And so they, the cronies in the legislature bit, and they passed our bill, and it went to a statewide vote and passed by 86%. So that was like a really big success for libertarians, and demonstrated what we could do once we got organized. There were enough of us across the state where we could actually communicate with enough legislators to make things happen. And so we've had other similar successes, like abolishing all the knife control laws, and passing stand your ground and castle doctrine, and getting some reforms in homeschooling and other legislative proposals in the early years that started proving that we could have a significant impact even if there weren't any overt libertarians in the legislature by coalitioning with Republicans in many cases. And we attempted to coalition with Democrats. We got actually a couple early movers got elected as Democrats in the legislature. And, of course, the Democrat establishment denounced them as, quote, not real Democrats. And so the Democrat Party wasn't welcoming at all to us, even despite the fact that there are obvious issues where libertarians are in agreement with the left on social progressive issues like gay marriage and legalizing pot and stuff like that. They just didn't want to work with us.
Yeah,
And
there are some
but
people there are some people that just don't know how to take the win.
yeah, yeah, and they it's like at that time you may remember Ralph Nader was running for president, and at that time that's when we had Michael Bednarik as the Libertarian Party candidate, and both the Greens and the Libertarians we both petitioned to get our guys on the ballot, and the Democrats started going door to door. Basically, they would get a copy of all of our petition lists that we submitted for certification, and they went go door to door to the people that signed our ballot access petitions to make them recant their signatures to keep, primarily to keep Ralph Nader off the ballot because they feared losing left-wing votes to the Greens, but also they did the same to libertarian ballot signers. And we had to go to the election commissions over this, and it was a big nasty battle. And so and then we drafted a bill to reform ballot access laws to reduce the signature requirements and to reduce the number of votes required, the percentage of votes required to stay on the ballot in subsequent elections. And both parties opposed our attempts to reform the ballot access law. And we basically told them, listen, you can either support these reforms or we're going to take over one or both of your parties. And of course, both of them at that point laughed at us. Not the Republicans that allied with us on a lot of things, but your, McCain, Cheney, you know, Romney type country club rhinos, they laughed at us. And of course, the Democrat establishment types, they laughed at us. And so we said, well, this, you laugh at us and then you'll fight us and then we'll win.
Yeah,
And that's what we've been doing.
going backwards a little bit to where I referred to you as one of the few free staters, one of the few New Hampshire natives who can call themselves a free stater. They're, in a sense, that's true. In a sense, it's not. Technically, a free stater is someone who signs a thing called the statement of intent. Basically,
Right.
it's an intent to move to New Hampshire and fight for liberty. But of course, a person who's already in New Hampshire can't move. The thing that makes you special is that you signed before New Hampshire was picked. So
Right.
what that meant was that you became one of, I guess, only 200 or 300
Yeah. At
New
the
Hampshire.
time, there were 275 libertarians in the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. And I'm pretty sure we got most of them to sign the statement of intent. And we got some other people who weren't libertarians who to sign. I'm not recall the exact number. So yeah, that's a fair estimate.
Yeah, but there was nothing like that in any of the other states, which is why I voted for New Hampshire. We had a
Yeah.
vote for which state to move to, and
And,
there were no other states that even had a movement really to try and recruit us to move
yeah.
here. And to me, that was sort of an epiphany. I really didn't want to go somewhere I wasn't welcome.
Right.
I didn't want to intrude, but
And
In New Hampshire, I felt like I was being recruited to be here.
And I consider myself a true libertarian also because at the time that Jason first contacted me, right at the beginning, I was seriously, I was packing things, I was buying, I was doing all kinds of things to prepare for an actual move to Alaska. And I actually gave up those plans to commit to the Free State Project. So I was at that point committed to go to Alaska, and I abandoned those plans. And so I was willing to go, wherever the vote went.
Yeah,
So
I was kind of the same way. I was kind of gearing up to move to Wyoming. I went and scouted it. I wrote an article about it, when the Free State Project was trying to pick a state for us to move
yeah,
to. And I uh I was pro Wyoming for sure. Even after I left, I was still pro Wyoming, but around that time, and I really liked Wyoming. I like the climate there a lot better than New Hampshire, but the the topography and everything, the lack of ticks and the dryness, it's all great. But but what happened was the governor of New Hampshire basically invited us to be here,
yeah,
and then the Libertarian Party had actively done. There was a lot of organized recruiting going on, and I just couldn't ignore that. And I also it seemed like a place where I'd make more money or be
yeah,
less poor, at least less poor or something.
better jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it worked. And that was 20 years ago now, or 21 years ago when I toured Wyoming, and 20 years ago when I moved here.
yeah.
And
Craig Benson was a great governor. It's too bad he was only a one-term governor, but they had it in for him. And but he was great for he spoke at the LPNH convention in 2004, and we actually refused to nominate our own gubernatorial candidate uh, in order to not have someone competing against him because we supported. He was really a libertarian in everything but name, and so he was really one of us. And it was great to have him. He and John Babiar, as our state party chairman, were both good friends. They became good friends on the campaign trail during his first election, and that's how John wound up on the governor's, basically the equivalent of what Trump has now created, the Department of Government Efficiency, or Doge for the federal government, that was just announced this week. That's what Benson had done with John Babiar, is put him in charge of a state commission on efficiency.
yeah,
And
I don't know if Trump even knows this, but he's kind of been like there's a lot of terrible things about Trump, but the good things about him in many cases are imitations, whether he knows it or not, imitations of Craig Benson, governor
yeah,
of New Hampshire.
yeah, he's Craig's not that well appreciated or understood by a lot of people outside of New Hampshire, and in New Hampshire, the establishment didn't like him because he was such a maverick and an innovator. But he did a lot of good things for New Hampshire, and helped us really prototype a lot of things. That was the first time we got the state property tax down, I think by 50% in his administration. We got a lot of stuff accomplished with him, and of course, that stepped on a lot of powerful feet.
Did he
And
do you have a sense of what, like, for instance, we have numbers from the 2011 era session and from I guess, the last session where there was, I guess, an 11% cut in the overall state budget around 2011, and another 3% cut around 2022. Do you have a sense, what happened to the state budget during Benson's administration?
I couldn't give you an exact figure, but I know he did some serious cuts because my little sister was pissed at me because she was on the board of a mental health and homeless and single mother charity here in the Upper Valley. And these private charities were receiving funds from the state government to provide a lot of services to people, that rather than people going to the state government to have a bureaucratic solution. And the way things were established, it was a pretty good deal because it was actually pretty efficient. These charities did do a better job than bureaucrats could have. So, but they cut a lot of that funding, and so that really annoyed people that were in that. And I had to deal with both sides of it because of my family connection. But I can say that there was some significant cuts there and in a lot of places. John Babiars can tell you more about that. He had more hands on.
Yeah, and I think the cuts that happen again that we didn't, the budget hasn't gone down every session in New Hampshire since Benson, but the fact that it's gone down at least twice in dollars, not even in real spending, but just the number of dollars spent was going dramatically down in one case and somewhat down in another case. It proves that we don't even need a governor to do that stuff because we didn't, it was the legislature that was cutting the spending in the 2011 era.
Yeah, yeah. And once we got enough of our people and our allies elected with the help of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance PAC, then we could drive the legislative agenda within the House rather than top down from the governor's office. And we've been far more effective that way in the long term.
So I was interviewing Seth Hipple, he's sort of the New Hampshire's best known liberty lawyer. He was saying that he has concerns about, and I should probably ask someone from the Liberty Alliance about this, but he was saying he has concerns that the alliance is becoming too right-leaning, if that makes sense. It's New Hampshire.
I see that, and basically what he's concerned about is that the people that volunteer for the work that needs to be done by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, because what the NHLA does is every legislative session, they look at every bill and grade it on whether it is a pro-liberty or anti-liberty bill, and then track the floor votes on every bill for every legislator to derive the grades for each legislator. So, and those grades determine which legislators get election funding from the NHLA. So, yes, there is an issue where the volunteers that actually do the volunteer work of deciding, in their opinion, what's pro-liberty and what's anti-liberty, drive the whole process and determine where that funding goes, which candidates get the money and which don't. So, if you think that the NHLA is drifting too far right, and that's a natural consequence of the fact that the Republicans have been very welcoming to Free Staters and to the NHLA since the start, whereas the Democrats have been nothing but hostile to us. So it's only natural that the people that would show up and do the work would predominantly have, if not a center libertarian bent, but, there would be enough that would be on the right side of libertarianism, as well as some Republicans to help do the work. So you're naturally going to wind up with a bias being built into that process, and complaining about it and not doing anything isn't solving the problem. If you think there's too much right bias in the NHLA, there's an easy solution. Show up, volunteer your time, help grade the bills, and then we can determine more accurate grades that are more into the center of libertarianism, and from that grading the performance of each legislator, so we can get a more center libertarian position on how the legislators are doing. So don't just complain if you think it's too biased. And the NHLA is very open. If you want, they welcome the help. because it's a lot of work to grade every bill and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of discussions that go on. So, if you don't like how it's going, show up. That's all it takes. Show up and put in the work. And, people are open to participation, and it's a consensual process where, everybody's opinion matters, and people vote on, what they think the bent of the bill is. And if people don't show up to do that work, then fewer people are going to be deciding what those bills are going to be rated as. So, if it's people leaning right who are rating those bills, then you're going to get a right-wing bias. So if you don't like that, then show up and do the work.
Yeah,
This is
yeah. I think that's an outstanding answer. I hadn't thought about that part. And the other part that I didn't mention to Seth when I was interviewing him yesterday, the other thing is that I guess Jason Sorens reported around 2004. He's the founder of the Free State Project, this liberty migration to New Hampshire. He said that the ACU, which is the American Conservative Union that rates U.S. congresspersons on how
Mhm.
conservative they are, he said 7 out of 10 of their planks, I think, or 7 of the 10 litmus tests that they put these people through took a libertarian position. So the ACU position was the same as the libertarian position in 70% of cases. And I think that may be another indicator of what sort of pushes us toward Republicans sometimes.
Yeah, I, growing up, the first presidential election I was ever really that aware of was when I was in the fourth grade, and it was the Reagan's 1980 election, and there was many candidates on both sides, and it was Reagan who famously said that the heart of conservatism is libertarianism, and I remember that back then, as much as I remember him threatening his finger on the button and all the other things that he said that are very Trump-like. Uh, and it's that stuck with me, and so I drifted naturally from being a Alex Keaton young Republican into libertarianism, thanks to my military service in the Air Force, seeing all the fraud, waste, and abuse in the government firsthand. That turned me from a Republican into a libertarian. And, it always seemed to me that Republicans and libertarians get along pretty well for the most part. There's always going to be your, social conservative fundamentalist types that don't like libertarians' social positions and who are usually very weak on economics and fiscal issues, and often tend to be actually rather fiscally progressive, which is not great for a libertarian. So, there is going to be hostility from some religious conservatives who, want prayer in school and want, school funding to go to religious schools and that sort of thing. But there's, just as I've, back in the 2004 election, I was telling some Republicans that one thing that I didn't like in that election was the amount of religious conservatives that were growing in New Hampshire. And I was rather hostile at that point in time. I've become a lot more tolerant towards the religious right in the past decade or so. But back then I was calling them the American Taliban and that kind of thing. And because some of them would say some pretty awful things about libertarians as well. So so there's some natural parts of the Republican movement that are friendly to libertarians, and there's some parts that are not. Just as there ought to be some parts of the Democratic movement that are friendly to libertarians, at least in theory, but in practice tend to not exist whatsoever. So, the nice things about a lot of religious conservatives is they tend not to be that uh, government oriented in terms of legislating morality. And if they don't like you, they'll say that they'll pray for you rather than, wanting to eradicate you and your family like a Democrat would. So,
Yeah, well, in fairness to Democrats, I've never heard a Democrat say that. But the I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
well, as a libertarian, I've never been called a Nazi so often as I have in the last 4 years, even though I had not a single one of my positions has changed in over 20 years. And
Yeah,
I'm,
it's interesting. Yeah, I see a lot of other people getting called things like that, and it's still, I think, hasn't happened to me. I've been assaulted more by Democrats than by Republicans. I never come away with any bruises, but every 2 years someone will lay hands on me, or when I'm out trying to film or something like that, and
yeah,
it seems like
but
it's
it's like,
a thing.
campaigning on the campaign trail. I can always see, I can tell who's the more violent party by whose campaign signs get vandalized. I've never seen a Democrat's campaign sign get vandalized, but I've seen a ton of Republican campaign signs get vandalized. And so it's pretty obvious visually who's got the more virulent opinions about their opponents.
But yeah, and I've
And
never
at
seen
least from my experience.
I've never seen, you can't, it's hard to find people going into Biden derangement syndrome. It's always Trump
Yeah,
derangement. Like
yeah.
there's just nothing. I can't think of anything after the 2020 election that compares with what we saw
Oh
after the
yeah.
2024 election, with
Oh
people
yeah.
losing their minds and looking like they were being possessed and stuff like that. But speaking of that, the people who've lost their minds over Trump winning, they're not completely wrong, because there's going to be a lot of bad things that are going to happen over the next 4 years from a liberty perspective. I mean, can you think of anything we can do as libertarians in New Hampshire to help protect the human rights of our enemies of authoritarian, mostly leftists?
Well, I think it's a great thing that Ron Paul is going to be part of the Trump administration. And I think that a lot of New Hampshire libertarians have strong ties to Dr. Paul, as well as to Rand Paul, who's probably going to be taking a leadership position in the Senate once we deal with Cocaine Mitch and his little attempt to undermine Trump in the snap Senate election that McConnell just called for Senate leadership. But the father and son team of Ron and Rand Paul, I think they're the best channel that we have to communicating how we feel and what we like to see, and the fact that Trump has said that he's going to pardon uh, some of our the political prisoners that we're concerned about, whether it's the guys from Silk Road or Julian Assange or Edward Snowden. We've got friends who have been poorly treated in the last decade or so that Trump is, he's been seeing more of the light, and he's sought out libertarian support in this election. Even, if you saw the Libertarian National Convention where Trump spoke, he was very friendly, very positive, and very engaging, even in the face of a very virulent, hostile reception by the left side of the party. And so, I think that rather than taking this combative position, we should start off by taking him at his word of wanting a coalition government and engaging with the help of Ron Paul, with the help of Elon Musk, with the help of Rand Paul, with Vivek, with others that we've been friendly with in the past that are in his administration.
Yeah, well, and
So
it's
I think that
speaking.
people are concerned about him. They're buying a too much of the Democrat hate machine, and they really should take a more wait and see approach, because I'm never been a huge fan of Trump the person. I find him to be rude and crude and crass, and I didn't support him at all in 2016. I was running for state house rep in 2016, and as a Republican actually, and I overtly opposed his run for presidency, and I didn't vote for him in 2020. But the thing that I noticed through his first term is that all the people that hate me and hate my politics and hate libertarian politics are all the people who were lying and attacking Trump and organizing to burn down America's cities and institutions and so on and so forth for the entirety of Trump's first term. And they suddenly went silent in 2020 as soon as Biden got in office, even though they are supposed to be a grassroots, organic, independent movement. It was clear that it was really just more of the Democrat hate machine. And, I fully expect the BLM and Antifa riot machine is going to start right up, if not in the next few weeks, absolutely on January 6th, when the electoral votes are counted. We're going to see, I guarantee we're going to see a riot in DC far bigger than what happened in 2020 with those who were trying to get a proper constitutional consideration of refusing the electoral votes from states where the vote was compromised by illegal, undocumented mail-in balloting, and calling that an insurrection. The same people that were called that an insurrection will just call what the Democrats and the BLM and Antifa are going to do this coming January 6th once again as a peaceful protest, a reasonable demonstration.
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need to give you a 6-minute warning. This will automatically shut us off in 6 minutes, which will be
Okay.
about 37 past the hour. And so just anything important that you want to talk about, we only have 6 minutes to get it in. And I did want to ask you about, unless you have something else that's even more important, I just wanted to touch base with you regarding some of your projects. You've always got something going. I know you were involved in Second Life and the Linden cryptocurrency before there was such a thing as Bitcoin. So you're a true OG in that
Well,
respect. Well,
yeah, I built the first virtual stock exchanges in Second Life. So I, basically built the capital markets in the virtual world, the first of its kind. And, I first helped build it with some others, the World Stock Exchange, and then split off and started my own. That was called the Ancapistan Capital Exchange. So we capitalized a lot of virtual businesses in the virtual world. And it was a really interesting experience. But eventually it got to the point where we went into conflict with Linden Lab, with owned Second Life, and they seized all of our assets and all of our Linden dollars, and we wound up in litigation against them for 4 years. And
wow.
so I was, dead in the water, right on the verge where actually I was going to sell my company to a university in California, and they were going to leapfrog over the 2D online learning world straight into a 3D virtual campus for that was going to be the first of its kind, and that got sabotaged by what Linden Lab did to us. And so finally, in the meantime, before I got into Second Life, I had been involved with Nick Szabo, Hal Finney, Ralph Merkel, Wei Dai, and some others on, at the time we were calling it BitGold, and I went off into Second Life to make my money on imaginary land in Second Life, and they kept on, and eventually the ideas that we all put together between 1998 and 2008 became the Satoshi paper proposing Bitcoin. And so my little contribution to the whole effort was, well, this is only going to work if we have a big distributed ledger that tracks chain of custody of all the coins that's from their point of creation. And now I didn't know how to implement that, but Nick Szabo's game theory and Ralph Merkel's Merkle tree math and a bunch of other work by everybody, by Hal and by Wei and so forth, that all came together and became Bitcoin. And so since then, I've been working in the blockchain industry as an advisor to various crypto startups. And so I'm working with another free stater here in the state, Michael Tabone, who was a fellow at the Mises Foundation, and he was with with Cointelegraph. We're working together on a company called Drift Labs to develop Web3 video games that use tokens on the blockchain as a staking mechanism to get a share of the pot in. Right now, our first game is called Payout Pursuit, which is a virtual drift car racing game, and you pay to enter, and if you place or win, you get a share of the pot, and then some of the 30% of the pot goes to people that are staking the drift token, and so on and so forth. And so if you want that, you can go onto Uniswap and get drift token there and participate in the token economy. I'm working on developing actually a new version of Bitcoin that is going to be quantum tolerant, which means it's going to be immune to getting hacked by quantum computing, which is a big risk to the current version of Bitcoin. And that's a project that I'm really hot on right now. And I'll have more to announce in the near future as things develop.
Okay, we're at the 1 minute mark, Mike. If we do get cut off, it'll probably be pretty abrupt. But I just use the last minute to thank you for your time and for your just endless activism. There's so few people that can keep this going for 20 years, and you've done that. And I've tried to do that, and a few other people have, and you just, it's really fun to talk to people that were here at the beginning and look backwards. We've made a little bit of history. We've kept New Hampshire government relatively small, and it's something we can go to our graves with happily, even if nothing else happens.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to make good progress. And, everybody just needs to do what they can. You don't need to, martyr yourself, but, it's bad to get burned out, but, just do what you can. Every little bit helps as long as everybody's active and works together, and we can all move things forward.
All right, Mike. Well, we should do this again sometime, and
Sure.
I look forward to talking with you again.
Sure thing.
This will probably air in a few days
Thanks for having me.
on ridleyreport.com.
Do you value your privacy? Want hardware that works? Get Linux at New Hampshire's very own penguin.com.